So right about a year ago, I bought my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. I started filmmaking about 3 years ago. My very first camera was the Sony a6500. Then I moved to the Sony a7 III, and just last year, I purchased my Blackmagic Pocket 4K, which is the camera I'm talking about today. As soon as I purchased the camera, I remember being very excited because I thought this camera has everything I always wanted. Had 4K 60, Sony never had that. Had, a RAW codec, which is something that no other mirrorless camera even came close with. And I thought, okay, so everything that my Sony a7 III doesn't have, the Blackmagic will have. And my images are gonna look all of a sudden so much more cinematic, and I'm gonna make a purchase that is gonna step up my production value. And I was right, yes, but I also was wrong. And let me tell you why. I remember picking up the camera and going outside, shooting, being super excited about the new toy, and take my whole video, go home, edit, color it, and then watch it. And to be honest with you, I was not very happy with the result that came out. I thought this camera would just be so much better than the Sony, and it didn't look exactly so much better than I expected. Actually, the footage looked a little bit worse because, my footage now was shaky because the camera doesn't have IBIS. It was a little bit blurry because I wasn't very good with manual focusing. I was a little bit sad because I just spent so many dollars, just to buy the camera, kit it out, and then I was a little bit disappointed by the result. And then, some YouTube reviews came out and people start saying the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera is a good camera, but it's not the perfect camera because it doesn't have IBIS and it doesn't have autofocus. And so, I started to find a little bit of comfort in those words. I started to feel like, oh, okay, so this camera maybe is not as good as I thought it was. But then on the other end, at the same time, I would see some other YouTubers or some other videos on YouTube that were incredibly beautiful shot with this camera, super cinematic. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. How is it possible? This is kind of the reason why I bought this camera, to have this beautiful cinematic images. Why can't I get this? It was a little bit of a bummer, but after 2 years into filmmaking, I had to pretty much rewire my whole brain and start my process of filmmaking all over again. I used to be the type of guy that puts the camera on the gimbal and just keeps it on 99% of the time, tries to take some interesting shots and stuff like that. Well, the Pocket 4K didn't even fit on my gimbal. And at that time, after buying all that stuff for the Pocket, I didn't really have the money to buy a bigger or better gimbal. So what do I do now? And well, then I decided I was just gonna do it old school. I just took the camera in my hands and started working a little bit on my handheld movement. I started adding point of contact, and my shaky footage started to become a little bit more stabilized. And then, I would improve a little bit my manual focus skills, and, little by little, my footage was coming better and better. And then I have 12-bit RAW codec. Damn, I need to learn how to color grade. There's no way that these images are so muddy like that. I need to do something about it. So I went a little bit online, I worked hard on my color grade, and I was able to pull off some amazing colors that I never thought I could ever pull out from a camera. And at that point, little by little, month after month, project after project, I started to become more and more confident to work with this camera. The quality of my work just went through the roof, honestly. I see that how all the discomfort that this camera put me through, the lack of, IBIS, no autofocus, it was actually something that made me a better filmmaker. And, I figured out now that instead of making like a very confusing, all over the place gimbal shot, it's just much better to take a very clean handheld shot, even on a tripod. But if it's well framed, with nice lighting, with a nice color grading, it's gonna tell so much more of a story than a confusing gimbal shot that it's all over the place and messy. I also figured out that, because I don't have autofocus anymore, it's fine if you close down the aperture a little bit. It's fine to shoot at f5 instead of 1.8 or 1.4 all the time because you have autofocus and you can do it. Having more blurry images doesn't mean the footage is gonna be more cinematic. In fact, lots of movies don't have that incredible depth of field because they rely on very simple principles, which is nice composition and framing, great lighting, and good color grading. Once you have those things, you don't need to do crazy stuff with the camera. You don't have to do crazy acrobatic moves. The footage will tell a story, and it's gonna capture the audience way more than a video that it's all over the place, full of transitions. It's just, in my opinion at least, it's like that. And you know, now because I went back to the basics, because this camera slapped me in the face and told me, hey, your first 2 years of filmmaking didn't really teach you a lot because you don't know how to handle and focus properly. Well, now when I pick up another camera like the Sony a7 III, my footage looks a lot better because, you know, I'm more focused on what's in front of the camera more than the camera itself. I know that if I put a nice composition, a nice color grading, and a nice lighting, even the Sony, that it's just 8-bit, it's gonna look incredible. So this camera really taught me a lot with its caveat. Another thing that makes me very happy is that now, thanks to this camera, I can jump on a professional set. If I'm handed a red or an airy, I know I can pull it off. I know a little bit how to handle, I know how to manual focusing, and this really gives me a great feeling that I can handle pretty much everything that's been thrown at me. This camera for $1,300 gives you 4K images up to 60 frames per second in RAW with 13 stops of dynamic range. With that said, you don't need anything more than this to create amazing stuff. Thank you so much for watching this video. Subscribe, that would really mean a lot. Drop a comment if you have any questions, drop a like, that's always super appreciated. And I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.